boys have very specific names based on what we've read tonight that show the hand of God in Joseph's life. This is something interesting. This is one of those things that is the obvious. I can't even remember which writer I read after when I was studying this. And when I saw it, I thought to myself, how did you miss that? How in the world did you miss that? When Joseph named his boys, watch this. Joseph is in Egypt. Joseph married an Egyptian wife. Joseph has an Egyptian name. His wife has an Egyptian name. He gives these boys Hebrew names. He doesn't name them after things of the world. He names them after the language of his people. He did not want these boys to forget where they came from. Young folks, don't ever forget where you come from. Don't forget, hey, listen to me. Some of you young folks need to be mindful of where your parents have come from. Right. Don't forget about that. Don't forget about the struggles your parents have gone through. Don't forget about the lessons, life lessons they have taught you. It's okay to get a little dirt on your britches when you go out in the woods and pray. Don't get too big for them britches. Right. Don't forget your heritage. You may become a great Bible teacher. You may go to school and get letters after your name, but don't forget where you come from. Don't forget that. So what did he do? What did he name these boys? Well, let's look here just for the sake of the first one. Verse 57, he called the first one Manasseh. Now, I always forget which one was first, Ephraim or Manasseh, because we always hear Ephraim and Manasseh in the other parts of the Old Testament. But the first is Manasseh, the second one's Ephraim. Okay? But I just know Joseph did not name them after me, M-E. Manasseh and Ephraim. Maybe that will help you remember. But what did he do? Watch this. He named the first one Manasseh. For God said, He hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. That word Manasseh means forgetting. It means forgetting. And it's interesting that this reveals Joseph. I told you we see Joseph's hands out in public. We're seeing his heart right now. Look what he says here. What's he wanting to forget? For God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil in my father's house. Two things right here that God's helped him to forget. Help him forget all of his toil. No, we're not going to do it tonight. But if we go back to 37, 38, and we look at Joseph's attitude, we look at his attitude in Potiphar's house. He is standing strong against the wiles of that wicked woman in Potiphar's house, Potiphar's wife. We see his attitude in the prison. We see a wonderful attitude of somebody who seemingly is trusting God and he's doing what he's told, he's working hard, he's doing what he needs to do. But now that we're seeing Joseph's heart, these emotions are beginning to kind of crumble a little bit. And here's what he says. God has made me forget all my toil. You see, even though Joseph was a steward in Potiphar's house and had a great responsibility, access to the money, and had a lot of trust, a position of influence and power, and even though he had the same, if you will, in the prison house, he was still a slave. Hey, I'm just going to say this and move on. You take this however you want to take it. You can have all kinds of rights and responsibilities on paper. But if someone holds you under their thumb, you're still a slave. Right. Amen, preacher. Right. Amen. 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 He was still a slave. He said God made him to forget, watch this, all his father's house. Joseph had probably resigned to himself he would never see his father ever again. I mean, how many people you know who were slaves ever saw their fathers again? I mean, just think back in history. But Joseph, though that would have broken his heart not to see his dad, no doubt it would have really been tough to realize that the last family members you saw not only were glad to see you go, they're the ones who kind of pushed you out the door to start with. Right. He had to turn around and forget about all of his family. Forget about his brothers. So he names his firstborn Manasseh. He names the secondborn Ephraim. Ephraim means fruitful. One of the writers I read after said this, that Ephraim, the kind of carries with it the idea of double fruitfulness, if you will. And what that means is that he has seen fruit in God's hand in his life. Joseph's now second in command in Egypt. He's seen all the fruit, the grain coming in. But this right here is happening during the fruitful years. Remember, the famine's not come yet.
Right.
These are the years of plenty. We don't know how many years difference there were between Manasseh and Ephraim. But what we do know is this: he was able to look at Ephraim and realize that God had blessed him to fruitfulness. God had used the gifts and talents and abilities that he ingrained in Joseph, and that he used the time in Potiphar's house, the time in the prison house, to train him in, now to save the entire nation. He's seeing the fruit of the work of God in his life, and he calls that second boy fruitful. He's in a place of influence, and that fruitful life that he has is going to preserve life for others. Before I move on tonight, I want us to look back at verse 51 for a minute. 52, Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh for God. Look at verse 52. And the name of the second called Ephraim for God.
Amen.
You see where the credit's going? This is not just being named simply because he wants to name for getting it fruitful, but he's seeing the hand of God in his life. It begins that way. He's marking these boys with intent. These two boys are a living memorial. And every time he sees those two boys, he's going to see that God's let him forget all of his toil, and God has made him fruitful in the land. He doesn't have a wasted life. He's got a life that means something, a life that's making a difference, a life that is doing something in the lives not only of his family, but also in the lives of Pharaoh's house and all the land of Egypt. So